Golf Commission. I'm going to ask him to lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And I should say from the Golf Club Building Committee, right? All right. So we have a couple of members that are detained for a few minutes. So with that in mind, if it's okay, I'm going to ask that we take some things out of order. Does anybody have a problem with that? Or Jenna? So the first thing we're going to go to is item number 2. We'll just here consider an act upon the suspense list for the tax collector. Good evening.
I know, he looks really good.
Do you want to step us through the document? We'll go from there. Sure. Thank you, and welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Okay, so nothing out of the ordinary. Same as last year. These are accounts that either myself or the delinquent tax collector have diligently researched into, and we've determined that, you know, whether it's a car tax and the individual is deceased, or personal property, the business either closed, moved out of town, we've determined that, yes, it's still by law collectible for 15 years, but we suspended it because we do not anticipate collecting it.
Is this, please remind us, is this amount similar to prior years as well?
So it's actually $25,000 less than last year.
Does anybody have any questions on this item, which the item is to hear, consider, and act upon the suspense list for the tax collector? Seeing none, can I have a motion to take this up? Mr. DeWitt, do I have a second? We'll go with Mrs. LeClaire. The item is now before us for a vote. Anybody? All in favor of approving the suspense list for the tax collector? Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Mayor, remind me, do I have to sign this? I think I have in past years. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. You're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you. Should they all go that fast, huh? All right. Skipping around, let's go to item number 9. To hear, consider, and approve the minutes of the February 6th, 2018 regular meeting, February 27th, 2018 quarterly review, March 1st combined public hearing, March 6th combined public hearing, and the March 8th combined public hearing. Can I have a motion to put this item before us? Mr. DeWitt, seconded by Mr. Mottola. We're going to take the minutes separate, individually, in case people were absent on any given evening. With that in mind, let's do the February 6, 2018 regular meeting. Questions, comments, concerns on those minutes? Seeing none, I'm going to call them for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Brown abstains. The rest of the motion carries. February 27th quarterly review meeting. Questions, comments, concerns from anyone? Seeing none, all in favor of these minutes? Opposed? Abstentions? Item carries. March 1st, 2018, combined Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen public budget hearing minutes. Questions, comments, anybody? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Item carries. March 6th, 2018, combined Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen public budget hearings. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Item carries. March 8th, 2018, combined Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen public budget hearing minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? One abstention, Mr. Mottola. So the minutes are all approved for those meetings. Okay. Let's go right to the update on the H. Smith Richardson Clubhouse. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here this evening. Mr. Calabrese, thank you for coming. It's Old Friends Week here. Welcome, gentlemen. Mr. Schwartz, you're like a bad penny. You keep on coming back.
Yeah, your 12-year-old's gonna pay for that. I got it on tape, too.
Ryan's going to strike out a lot this Little League season. All right. Welcome, gentlemen.
2 strikes.
Let's go.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Tom. My name is Craig Curley. I'm the chairman of the H. Smith Richardson Clubhouse Building Committee. With me tonight is Hal Schwartz. He's the vice chairman of the committee as well. Before the committee was formally formed, while we were going through this process of getting the seed money approved for the committee, we had mentioned that we would come back periodically and provide updates to this board along with the RTM and the Board of Selectmen. So that's why we're here tonight. Generally speaking, the process has been moving along better than expected. We've been meeting twice a month, the second and fourth Tuesday of each month. And I can say the building committee is quite large. We have 11, so it's a bit of a tough meeting to run. But generally speaking, I could not be more pleased with the makeup of the committee itself. We've got really talented people that's very diverse, really diverse backgrounds, and everyone offers something. So that's the overall budget or overall update. Hal's going to take you through some of the numbers. I'm going to take you through more of the project summary, and then kind of touch on what our next steps might be and things like that. So with that, I'll turn it to Hal.
Okay, so in the paperwork that you have, there was the summary that we gave you. It's page 3 of the document. As you well know, when this committee was formed by the Board of Selectmen, they voted us in, and then they voted $250,000 in seed money for us. We were then put on the back burner by the RTM until January. The RTM did the same thing again, which was voted on the committee, and after this board passed the $250,000, they did as well. What we found out after the committee was formed, we were made aware of the owner's rep who was assigned to be with us, and the fees that came along with that. So we were unaware of the time that the fees were going to be where they were. So what you're looking at is the first draft of our budget, which is where it was, which was helped put together by Colliers. We had assumed the architect fees to be about $165,000, and then the other fees you can see. And as you can see by the first line, right out the gate, we were over budget, which after being in front of this board last time, we couldn't be. So we started working closely. Colliers has been phenomenal. They were contracted to do $8,100 a month for 10 months, or a total of $81,000. Because the budget got so tight, they were willing to work with us, and they reworked their contract. So they worked the first 3 months of our contract with them for a total of $8,100. And then they're going to work the balance of the 9 months up until the point of development. So they will be back on budget. The company has been fantastic. They've worked with us. They help streamline the process for us to get to the architects. As you can also see, the original architecture fee that we assumed up until the development phase was going to be about $165,000, so we had to knock that back. As of this week, or as of Tuesday night, we have narrowed it down to 4 architecture firms. The town put out bids. We had 8 firms put bids in. Tuesday night, we whittled it down to 4. We will start the interviews on those in 2 weeks. The numbers that came basically in the first column, the initial bids from the architects, so we have a little work left to do. But Colliers has made some arrangements with us that if things get tight on the front end, that they'll be willing to work with us on the back end. So I just wanted this body to know that I know that firm has done some work with the town before, and I know they're looking to do more work with the town in the future, and they've been very cooperative and very helpful in guiding us to streamline the process and to keep the expenses. So as of this point right now, we are on budget. And we will be selecting an architect by the end of the month. once we get an architect in and we sit down and start talking about options and that stuff, and Craig's going to take you through the fun part of our night.
Are there any questions on the numbers? Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you. Just so I'm clear, you mentioned the project management. I thought that's what you meant. That was higher than you had expected it to be, right?
Well, when the committee was actually formed, we didn't know, when the Board of Selectmen gave us $250,000, we backed into that number based on a $5 million or so project, which is where the numbers were based on for the seed money. The Collier's expenses wasn't worked into our budget initially. The committee didn't know. The committee wasn't officially formed when the money was given to the committee. Actually, the Board of Selectmen did it before the committee was formed. So we sat down at our first meeting, we met Collier's, and he said, oh, $81,000. And we went, well, wait a minute, we have a problem.
Who signed up Collier's before the committee was?
Well, it wasn't actually signed, but the RFP was out. And they had the best.
Who shepherded?
It was a recommendation by the Board of Selectmen for us to use Collier's, and we're very, very, very happy with them. But we needed to have their contract reworked. I believe that contract was actually just signed a week or so ago, because all the paperwork, the I's had to be dotted and the T's had to be crossed. So the fee is the same total amount, but it's over a longer period of time.
So my two questions, I mean, we've always talked about owners. We haven't had a building committee in the last, I don't know, 10 years without an owner's rep. So I'm surprised you guys didn't know that. But I guess my real question is this: do we really need an owner's rep now during the planning process?
Right.
Because it's a pretty significant part of your budget here.
Yeah, excellent question. I agree. My understanding, I have not been on a building committee before this, so for me, I'm a bit wet behind the ears. But having said that, my understanding is that projects always have an owner's rep. It's just a question of when they come into the fold, right?
Yeah, it's always. I always thought it was more the execution phase after you've got plans and that kind of stuff. Right?
Absolutely, and I think generally, historically, that is what the town has done. My understanding is that our committee was kind of a pilot for the town to consider bringing in the owner's rep sooner to help expedite the process and make it a bit more efficient. And clearly, there's a cost to that, and that's what that was. Frankly, the miscommunication in terms of that difference and where that cost would be taken care of.
But this doesn't sound like your miscommunication. I mean, this is the first I'm hearing of it, that we need an owner's rep during this phase. But what I am hearing from both of you is that you've backed off on the architect, which is really the reason that I signed up.
Yep.
And I'm also seeing that you've taken $25,000 that you had allocated for a site survey, and you've glommed that on the architect. So what you're really saying is your original estimate of $190,000 is down to $135,000.
Yeah,
which is a little disconcerting to me. Right?
Fair enough. And just to be clear, this is still marked draft for a reason. It's a budget. The RFP process is a bid process. We did go out with an RFP, and we've gotten bids in. So we have numbers, and they will be different than this, right? And so part of our selection process will be determining if how many of the bids are within our means, how many are over, and if there is a firm that is over our means, how do we manage that? And that may be that we continue to work with Collier's. And just to be more specific on the Collier's point, because they have added a tremendous amount of value. I can say that as talented as this building committee is, the Collier's group has definitely led us, and we are much more efficient as a result. So the fact that we've been able to go out and establish or go out and get bids and have bids in and be ready to make a selection in 2 weeks is quite a task. But point being, the original quote from Collier's was $8,100 per month, and through the design development phase, which was anticipated to be a 12-month process. So it's actually a $97,000 bill. The part of their first renegotiation with us in good faith, they said, hey, look, we don't need to be boots on the ground 9 to 5 every day during this design phase, so therefore we will charge you 1 month for 3 months time. So effectively, we're getting 3 months worth of work because it's not full-time at this point for them. And that allows us to get $81,000 over a 12-month period at effectively the cost of 10. Now, the next point that Hal raised was that they've also gone so far as to say they see their relationship with Fairfield, the town of Fairfield, as being an important one to them, and they'll continue to work with us as a committee and work with the town more generally. So if we are within shouting distance on the architect line, but we are over, what they've told us is that they would be willing to defer some of their fee to a later stage in the project so that they could, once the numbers are more finalized, and they really are acting in good faith and as a good partner to help us manage that top line. Because the one thing that the committee is committed to is making sure that the 250 is something that we can work at.
Right, and that really is my concern, right? You know, you guys came to us in good faith. Here's our real numbers. You gave us numbers that you're trying to stick to. You're doing a lot more. It's just I feel like you were given a 1/3 of your budget, you know, change. And
Yeah, well, I think what you guys, if you look over the history, this is really only the second building committee that the town has established that hasn't been an education facility. So we're kind of, besides Penfield, and we all know what that was like, this is kind of a groundbreaking thing because the town hasn't done any other kind of building besides schools. And all of that pre-work
You're
that's
not
done
trying to imply we're going to build this, wreck it in a year and have to rebuild it, are you?
No, this is
Oh,
going to
okay,
be a
good.
long-term project. But because this was the first time, the town felt to have them in early was a good thing, and the committee agrees. It was, like you said, it was a communication thing. We didn't know, and if we had known, I'm not sure we would have been able to do anything about it because the Board of Selectmen had already, the money was already there. So from the Board of Selectmen, we would have had to start over. But because Colliers has worked so well with us, you know, we have no fear that we will get to where we need to get, especially based on the numbers that we saw Tuesday night. You know, four of the firms were very, very close to where we needed them to
Well,
be.
so where you are is you had an original draft, you have a current draft, now you actually have bids, you're going to level the bids and come back to us and say, we're within the 250 and these are where the numbers shake out, right?
Yes, that's our plan from moving
Thank you.
forward.
Anybody else on the numbers? Mr. Curley, why don't we go to the next part of the presentation?
Sure. We wanted to get to the numbers first, so that's why we kind of jumped right into it. That's where this
Thank
group
you.
is most interested in, right?
Yeah.
But I did want to mention that more generally, the committee took quite an effort to create a 4-page document which was shared with you as part of your attachment tonight. No need to go into it in detail, but the point of that document was to be as clear as possible in layman's terms with what the objective and scope of the project should be, taking into consideration the charge and the somewhat conflicting goals that were presented to us. Clearly, in our original charge from the Board of Selectmen, they want us to keep costs down in this financial environment. I think that's in line with this committee as well. But to also prioritize for golf first, keep options open for future non-golf alternatives or amenities in the future. The RTM was focused more on the non-golf side of things, so it's a bit of a juggling act. But bottom line is, I think the committee did a very good job of defining very clearly what we were expecting from the architects. The RFP was built off of that, and we got very clean responses to our bids, or bid responses to our RFP. As Hal mentioned, we had 8 firms provide bids. Our committee met a couple of nights ago, and we narrowed that down to 4. We've invited those 4 to present to us in 2 weeks' time. That'll be open to the public, so love to see some of the public there as well. So we'll get to see some of the ideas presented to us, but all of the responses came from firms that were highly qualified, really presented well. We had a tough time picking, so I'm confident that the ideas that get put in front of us will meet what we asked for, but also be mindful of the budget as well. So,
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much. So thank you for that. So my first question is about the location.
yeah.
You cite here the final location on the grounds should also be reconsidered. Relocating the clubhouse so that it overlooks the golf course would make for a more appealing venue. Relocating the clubhouse to the opposite side of the property off Hoyden's Lane should also be considered. So my question, and this is new.
Yeah.
My question is, when you asked the architects to bid, what were they bidding on? Which location, and how does this factor into the building?
Yeah, excellent question. So part of the brainstorming that the committee went through was to really, as we defined the scope of the project, clearly we need to consider a renovation. That then we wanted to have the architect consider a tear down and a replacement, which might take different forms. One of the committee members suggested that we talk about and explore the idea of moving the clubhouse to the other side of the property, on the Hoyden's Lane side, which is across the street from the current driving range. I think that caught the committee off guard as well, to be honest. And we talked about it for a long time, and that option really does have merit. So we felt that it was important to consider that. So what we did when we went out, to answer your question, what we did in the RFP is we asked the architects to consider 4 options. First option was a renovation. Second option was a tear down and a replacement in near the general facility of the clubhouse now, but perhaps 50 feet to the side, so it does have a view overlooking the golf course. The third option was to consider it up on the other side of the property. And the fourth was, to the extent that we hadn't thought of something, if the architects wanted to present something that we had perhaps not considered, surprise us. So give us option 4. Now, when we received the RFPs responses, everybody limited their responses to 3. So we did not get that wild card back. But all of the firms considered that when they provided quotes on what their fees would be. They were all for each of the 3 options.
I would only say on the Hoyden's Lane one, there would be other considerations regarding traffic and everything else on that road. I was just up there a couple of weeks ago. There was a softball game, and you couldn't get down that road.
Yeah, the committee has made inquiries into town bodies as to the viability of going up there. Craig and I spoke about it at length, and we didn't want the committee to get all excited about going up top, because honestly, if you think about it, if the clubhouse does go up there, and we do realize there's challenges, but that leaves the bottom half where the clubhouse is now for Parks and Recs to do all the other items that the town has been asking for. So we needed to make sure, and we talked to town bodies, and nobody has told us that we can't do it. Monetarily, we don't know if we can do it. There are challenges, but there's no legal ramifications that say we can't look at that option. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of things that we need to take care of before and then after, if that's where we decide to go. We need to have discussions with the town bodies prior to making that decision, because there's going to be some pushback, I guess is the word I want to use. But we do have there's a lot of property up there. So, all that property that comes down from the driving range, and, that could be turned into parking, which would help for the softball as well. There's a lot of logistical things that need to be taken care of. But the the finished product gives the town so many more options for all the 12-month period of time that they want to use the property for, so.
Mrs. Marmion,
The
did you have
table.
a follow-up? My apologies, I jumped in because it just kind of hit me.
No, I guess I was on the RTM when the driving range was created, and there was a lot of softball. I'm
field.
sorry, softball. And
I
there
was
was
there too.
You were there too, Hal. And there was a lot of discussion about, traffic, et cetera. So I'm intrigued by the idea.
Which is where we are.
Right, but I also thought that there was an issue with open space restrictions up there for buildings, so I'm assuming you're going to take a look at all of that. I'll leave it at that.
What it really boils down to is we've done a little bit of homework to make sure that we don't have to take it off the table. And until we get to a point where we think we want to go there, if somebody said don't do it, then we would have pulled it. But since nobody told us don't look at it, it's just an option.
Mr. Mottola, did you have something
I just had a curious question.
on this item?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
If you did that, is part of the plan then changing the holes of the golf course? In other words, the first hole would be different? Mr. Golfer.
Yeah. So the nice thing about there are pros and cons to this option as a consideration. One of the benefits of the moving it up there would, in terms of the course layout, each of the 9 holes that are currently front 9, back 9 would be intact. They'd be flipped, so the back 9 would be the front would be the back. The hole orders would be in the same sequential order, but the starting point would be different. So if the clubhouse were to move to where the current maintenance shed is, that's right at the 11th tee, so that becomes 1. 10th hole becomes 9, then you go over, 7th hole becomes 10, and then the 6th hole coming up the hill would finish right in front of the clubhouse, and that would be 18.
Thanks. Mr. Brown, did you have something?
Well, switching all those holes, we spent a lot of money on all those holes over the past 10 years, right? What's the budget for the building? 4.7?
As of this point, there's no budget for the building. I would estimate that depending on the different options, it could be 4.7. I think the estimate for the renovation 10 years ago was 3.5.
Right.
And with escalation, I imagine the renovation would come in probably around 4.7. Our goal is to, frankly, stay under 6 if we can. I think if we build something more than that, it would be a tough sell. But at the end of the day, I think we'll evaluate the options. If the renovations option is much cheaper than a rebuild, that's the one that we would recommend. But if the renovation, given the age of the building, becomes something that's virtually the same as a rebuild, we would likely recommend a rebuild. If the benefits of moving to the top of the hill outweighed some of the costs or detriments, I do anticipate that would be the most expensive option. But two of the pluses to considering going up to the top of the hill that are financial in nature, one, it would allow the golf course to golf operations to be completely uninterrupted during construction. So if we try and build in its current footprint or near, we do have to worry about where do we park, how much does the golf course get affected, and juggle that as much as possible. If we're building up top, the current clubhouse stays in place, the parking lot stays in place, so that's the transition benefit. The biggest benefit that I see to considering going to the top of the hill is that right now the driving range and the main area are separated, not just by a long walk, but by a car ride, and as a result, the driving range revenue for the town is roughly, on average, about $150,000 a year. Sterling Farms, for example, that has a driving range, sharing the same parking lot, revenues are closer to $1 million a year. Now, I'm not suggesting that those numbers would come close, but I have spoken with the Golf Commission and I have spoken with the Pro, and both bodies, both the Pro and the Commission, feel that the range revenue would double or triple from its current levels, that in itself could pay for $2 to $3 million of the project. So
Th-
if
those-
the
those are
incremental
just-
cost of moving up the hill is a little bit more, but inside that cushion, that's something that we should consider.
I just caution you to be very careful about accepting the numbers that people give. We've heard those types of numbers. They don't generally pan. You know what pans out? The cost. The cost we're certain of because we're spending the money. The revenue down the years, that is completely uncertain. And I would just caution as the committee moves forward that we just be careful about just going completely on a reservation where we didn't expect, off the reservation that we didn't expect to go. Because we've seen that
Yeah.
on building committees. And you know, so it's at the beginning phases here, and I know there's a lot of options, there's a lot of ideas, but there's only a certain amount of money I think that we can afford to bond.
No, and I appreciate that. I think the committee, and Hal will attest to this, the committee is very committed to finding the best answer for the town at the most reasonable cost. I don't think anyone is expecting to have an open checkbook.
Well, here's something to consider on that, and I'm not saying no. I'm not saying I don't have an opinion on it because I don't have the facts. What I do know is, to Mrs. Marmion's point, years ago, we went through a two-step process to buy that property up on Hoyden's Hill. The first step was to buy it, and then several years later to actually, Parks and Recs put together, along with other town bodies, the plan to actually turn it into softball. And there was an enormous controversy over that related to the neighborhood, right? So I'm listening to you guys, and I totally know where you're going. And Craig, you're absolutely right. Having that clubhouse up by the driving range for quote-unquote golf operations for all the reasons that you articulated, you're 100% right. And I think Jim's right in saying we've been burned enough by how much it's actually going to be, but let's just say it's going to result in more money. It stands to reason because I've had to do that drive as well as many other people. That being said, I think this project will be controversial enough because it is a recreational activity, and people are going to say, why are we spending $6 million? You factor that into what's going to be the impact on the neighborhood, and you're just compounding your potential controversial topic as we move forward. I would hope if you do come back and decide, hey, that is the option for these 20 reasons, I would hope part of what's discussed in that option is what is the impact on traffic? What is the impact on the neighborhood? What needs to be done to that road, right? What happens to those property values around there? Because I think those things all should be considered if there's the dramatic idea to move where the clubhouse is. And I would just, as you guys move forward, I would just say that's something that you definitely need to have considered, and you need to go in front of the appropriate town bodies. And hell, I don't even know who that is.
Yeah.
Police commission, fire commission, all of the above, neighborhood associations. That becomes a much more challenging project. It might be worth it, but it's a bigger hill. in
Which
my
is
opinion.
the exact reason, and like you said, I was on the RTM during the softball, and I remember what it took to get it done up there. And that was the first thing I said to the committee is, you know, if this all works, which is why we've reached out to certain people and asked specific questions about specific things. And again, we would have taken it off the table if somebody had told us that there were too many limitations. We are too soon in the process to take it off the table. I mean, it could go back and be an $8 million project, and then we know we're done.
Right.
But if it comes in and it's a couple of $100,000 less or more to go up there, then maybe it is worth the look and the ask and the conversations. And the committee also has to decide, are they willing to extend the time that we're going to be on the committee because we will have to deal with the neighborhood problem. We understand that there will be pushback from the neighborhood. We would want to sit down and talk to them and meet with them, find out their concerns and their issues, and deal with that. If it gets to be the point, and we would have to do all of that prior to making the ultimate decision. So this isn't the kind of thing that, we're 10, 11 months away before making a final decision by the time we get through everything and all of that. So we have a lot of time to talk, and we have a lot of people that we want to talk to. This is, again, one of the good reasons that we're here. We want people to know what we're talking about. I know that I've heard it through town where I've been umpiring and at the golf course, and people are already starting to talk about it. And the only issue that anybody is ever talking about is, do you remember the softball field? But again, we still need to put what's in the best interest of the town in front of everything. So Craig and I and the committee decided that it wasn't take it off the table time yet.
Understood. Mrs. Esmond.
Thank you, guys. So the two options, and there are only two for cart storage,
Got some.
right? But you can try to plug them into any of these three: as able, ledge, cost, whatever. And hopefully I didn't miss this, but if you move a building even on town property, is zoning's of course involved, and it would require approval, and then you would hold some public hearings. Or hearings is probably not the right word.
I think
We did for the Sunrise project on Stratfield. Yeah.
I think that's right. We would have to go get on their agenda and go through that process.
Thanks.
Okay. Mr. DeWitt.
Just real quick, Mr. Schwartz, you had mentioned something in passing that if we did move up to Hoyden Hill, that you'd be there'd be an area where the existing clubhouse is that, and I think your exact words were, Parks and Rec could do something with that. What did you mean by that? Because I don't know of any plans that Parks and Rec has for that particular area.
Yeah. Thanks for the follow-up, because I think we can add more color there. I think part of the charge that we were given was to prioritize the golf operation so that the cost doesn't get out of control, but preserve as much optionality for non-golf activities for the future. One of the suggestions that came from the Parks and Rec Commission was a full sheet of ice with a covered open-air pavilion. There's not enough square footage for that if the clubhouse stays where it is. I think we certainly are open to keep as much flexibility and optionality as possible for non-golf expansion in the future, but to the extent that we're limited in space, we're somewhat handcuffed. So one of the options that one of the benefits of considering moving up to the top of the hill is that one of two things can happen. As Hal mentioned, now all the square footage where the current parking lot and clubhouse sit, that could be for a tennis court, basketball courts, a pool, whatever the Parks and Rec decides is the potential future use. Now, another consideration would be the clubhouse, if we move it, is going to go where the maintenance shed is now. So the maintenance facility could move to the current clubhouse, and that's it. But with the clubhouse up near, off of Horton's Lane, near the property that Parks and Rec and the town owns, that could be the area. That's where the parking lot's going to go. The parking lot's going to be between the clubhouse and the driving range. It's a shared parking lot, which is going to be adjacent to the softball field. But if the Parks and Rec decides that in the future they want to consider other Parks and Rec activities, that's the location for it, because the parking's there, and there's plenty of room.
Yeah, no, I got it. That was my fear. That's what you were going to say. So, and you answered my second question, was where the maintenance shed's going to go. What about the golf cart shed is right next to the clubhouse today, right? Are you going to have to move that too?
Well, the nice thing about the clubhouse, the golf cart shed right now is dilapidated. That's going to come down. It's either going to be replaced in its current footprint, or it's going to, if the clubhouse stays near its current location, we're going to explore going underneath. That saves on the roof space, the heating, and all that other stuff, if there's not ledge and if it's not cost prohibitive. So we would build another shed somewhere on the property. The other
And let's not get too much into the hypotheticals, because we have no idea, right? At this point, this is one of four potential options.
Yeah.
Yep, got it.
But if we did move it up, because of the grading, it is anticipated that it would be an easy consideration to keep it underneath the building up top.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Anything else on this? Mr. Becker?
I have what is hopefully a pretty simple request. Don't necessarily need a tour or anything there. I've been in the building a few times, but I'm not a golfer and don't really go there very often. Haven't been there more than a handful of times. Can we maybe get a map that even just notes some of these basic hypotheticals that we're talking about here? So, because I don't really understand where this new location, how it relates to some of these other items, and maybe even something that has some other things like the ball field or really the driving range, and where that very, very basic is fine. But I think that'd be helpful just for the context.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Mrs. Marmee?
Thanks. On the tour, it was mentioned that the current facility, the restaurant facility, which is leased, correct? Or concession?
Yeah, concession contract.
And there was some discussion of, is there value in expanding this space for special events, et cetera? And of course, we have other places like Penfield, et cetera, where we have these, so we weren't sure what the cost benefit would be. But do the architects submit alternatives or options for expanding that space for driving revenue?
Excellent question. That was something that the committee discussed, and it was pretty clear in the RFP as to what we were looking for. I believe the direction that we, the committee, had received going into this process was that we didn't want a facility that would compete with Penfield. If Penfield was, rewind the clock a few years, if it was never rebuilt, then perhaps the town would be looking for a banquet facility. But it was rebuilt, and we don't want to compete with that. So we defined the need as a restaurant space that can accommodate a golf outing, which is roughly 150 seats. And in addition to that, a separate area for smaller groups to the extent that there's mixed use at any given time. So I don't think we'd have a facility that would be available for weddings unless it's a small wedding, perhaps, but it wouldn't be that type of venue. The other consideration is if we do stay in the near the current footprint, there's just not enough parking.
Anybody else? All right. Seeing none, gentlemen, thank you very much. We look forward to future updates. Good luck with your bids.
Tom, the only last thing I wanted to point out is on the back, the last attachment,
I saw the
we gave you
Gantt
a long
Yeah.
lead time, so to the it maps out the timeline for the next year and a half.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate it. All right. So now on our scorecard, pardon the pun, numbers 2, number 3, and number 9 are done. And we're going to go back to number 1 to start take things in order since we have a full board now. To consider and set the mill rate for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018 and ending June 30th, 2019. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to you and thank you for the documents.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, does everyone have a copy of the document? All right. So we can flip through the table of contents.
Can you please speak into the mic, and you're far away this evening.
How about, yeah, I can tell.
You look much better at this distance. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. I would not say that feeling is mutual because that would be rude.
Go ahead.
So our expenditure budget for the year, looking at Schedule A, is $305 million. And then we have the current revenue, the budgeted fees, services, and other revenue at $16 million, state revenue at $3,981,000. As everyone here probably knows, the state legislature voted last night, and the number is different. Plus, there's also a number that's in this schedule, I think Schedule E, and which we actually got pretty close, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Prior year taxes, which will be a total of non-current tax revenue of $23,946,000, leaving us a current year revenue required to fund operations from taxes of $281,245,000. And you add into that the credits and reserve requirements, the senior tax relief, state elderly and disabled, the assessment appeal estimates, the overpayment credits, the reserve fund collectibles, get a total credit and reserves of $8 million, leaving a total gross required tax levy of $289 million. And with our grand list in the close to $11 billion, that would give us a 26.43 mill rate, and which is a 2.36% increase from the prior year. The next page, Schedule B, everybody's familiar with. I don't think we need to go to it. It's just got lots of detail, so we can kind of skip over that. Schedule C, as you know, every year I say, okay, what are the issues? Where in the budget are there potential concerns, positive and negative? Starting with number one, state revenue. That's always been an issue, or at least in the last several years. So if it's in parentheses, it's a positive. If it's not in parentheses, it's a negative. So what we had estimated in going through all the conversations we had with people and going through all the budgets, we had estimated that there is a potential that the town would get $994,000 more than was in the budget. And on the other end, considering the governor's rescission budget recommendation, et cetera, a negative $2,232,000. So that's the range there. Interest rate change in our interest income analysis this year projection, we used the potential of a 100 basis point interest increase by the Fed during the year, and basically sensitivity tested that with a plus 25 and a minus 25 basis points, which gives us on the positive side potentially 151,000, on the negative side 164. We have an additional month of health care information. There was a slight degradation of $63,000 net town side, whereas and our actual increase comes in this year about 5.8%. If it ends up that we have a 7% total increase, which is like a trend, 7.5%, that would be a negative 334,000. The mill rate, the collection rate is set in this budget at 98.73, which is the highest it's been in the last few years. If that was to be the average, there'd be a negative 333,000. And the insurance expense, the HR director has been negotiating with the insurance companies. We originally had a plus 7.5% increase in a segment of our insurance premiums. He's completed the negotiations, and that ended up being a 3.5% decrease. So that's a positive $97,000 that's solid. The next page is an informational page because people like to see these numbers. It's a schedule of the state revenue going from 17 actual to 18 budget to 18 projected, what we think we're going to get this year. And then we have the 19 budget. Then there's the legislative adopted. There's the adopted budget variance analysis. And then there's the governor's rescission budget. And you can see that the 994,000 and kind of in the middle of the page there, and the 231, which I alluded to earlier.
So what's this trying to tell us?
It's information. Everybody always asks me what was last year, and people sometimes look at differences and they get.
I'm sorry. What did the legislature do last? Yeah. What are we getting?
We'll get to that on a less busy schedule.
Well, is it on this page though?
Yeah, it's no, because I wasn't correct.
Yeah,
so.
it's no.
It was attempted, but no.
Did you
the
say
number's
yes
not quite.
before you said no on that one?
I said yeah, no.
Or you voted yes before you voted no.
Yeah, exactly. We do that here, right?
Okay.
Or no, somebody does that. I don't know. Who does.
Yeah, Mr. DeWitt.
Bob, a quick question on the first page of Schedule C.
Yes,
I
sir.
like this minimum maximum thing, but the mill rate that you're recommending is
right in between min and max, or?
No, the mill rate that is in the budget is
Yeah.
before this analysis. Schedule E, when we get to Schedule E, then I'll kind of summarize all
Okay.
this information and where I think
Okay, got
we
it.
look. And that's changed since the meeting, because what actually happened in the legislature is different than what I fully anticipated happening. But not by a lot, by $20,661 or something like that.
You might be eating that, but go ahead.
Yeah. It's to the good.
You might be eating it well. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So then the page C3 is, or excuse me, I skipped over C2. That just shows what the numbers were with respect to the budget at the 100 basis point potential movement, and what the numbers would be with 75 basis point movement and 125 basis point movement. These are just supporting schedules to the Schedule C. Schedule C3, you can see the first box is what we had at the end of February. The second box, the one in the middle, is where we had at the end of March numbers. And you can see there's a total $75,000 extra cost to the town, which is divided between 12,000 WPCA and 62,000 for the town side. The third box is just the what-if scenario. If we actually have a 7% increase instead of just the 5.8% increase, which is in the budget. The next page, C-3A, is just the final spreadsheet from Aon that shows the numbers we base those numbers off of. Then C4 is the collection rate history. You can see that 17, we did have 18 is not in yet. Obviously, 17, we had a 98.73, which is the budgeted number. 16 was 98.65. 15, 98.61, and 3-year average is 68.67. Next page is just looking at different collection rates. I went down, not up. Okay, and then the last page. So there's a bit of a rehash here. You have the budgeted revenue required. Okay, the less potential additional state revenue, which we estimated at $704,000, is actually $724,661,000. That would give us, carrying it down through to the required mill rate, instead of 26.37, would give us 26.36, which would give us a tax rate increase of 2.09 instead of 2.13. So, Mr. DeWitt, your question, what am I recommending, if you will? I'm recommending that, the other risk factors.
Well, what are you recommending? You stopped in the middle there.
I'm recommending 2.09.
That's the increase, right? What's the mill rate?
23.36. Excuse me, 26, what did I say? 23? 26.36.
Yeah. We'll go with your first number. How's that?
You make a mistake, it's your bad, right? I mean, it's my bad.
26.36. Questions on the calculation? Mr. DeWitt?
Okay, so back to your Schedule C, right? So you laid out mins and maxes for risk factors. And then under Note 1, A, B, C, D, E, that's those 5 things in Schedule C, correct? And your assumptions.
Correct.
So you took the best case scenario for state revenue at 994.
With that is, actually, I took 994, 20,661, because that budget passed last night, and
That's an actual now.
that's an actual number, assuming the governor signs it, which.
So on
so that's-
Schedule
so
C,
that's
that
the
first,
risk.
that first line isn't a min and max anymore, that's an actual.
Schedule C.
Assuming governor's signature, correct statement.
Piece, right. And on the interest rate, you said, wait a minute, interest rate change to the market,
Yeah, I'd used 100 basis points in the initial.
100 basis points. Active health care, you
That's,
went.
that's an actual.
You kind of,
Well, there's two things. That the 63 is the latest information available. As you know, that's in the Internal Service Fund. It doesn't impact the general fund. So if it's doesn't come in where it comes in, if it comes in stronger or weaker, that impacts the Internal Service Fund, not the general fund.
no. God, I'm just trying to figure out where you are in this. You gave us all this good min-max data. I'm just trying to figure out. Collection rate, I get.
Well, that's what he's basically saying is either the risk or the upside. He doesn't know where they're going to come out.
But it seems like most of the numbers are leaning toward the most optimistic side, like the 63,000 in active employee health, which is 3, and now we have an actual on the state revenue, which is on the optimistic side. The interest rate is kind of middle of that min and max, right?
Correct.
The calculate the rate.
Should be kind of the middle.
It's kind of right. Insurance
The
expense
definition
you don't
of the
have.
min and max.
Yeah, the Aon calculations, Aon estimates have actually been pretty solid.
Well, Mr. Mayor,
and
put
it's-
it another way. So, A, you're using the best available information on the tax rate collected, the 98.73, which
Correct
is what we
statement.
got 2 years ago, right? B, you're using the best available information based on what the insurance experience has been to date.
Correct.
C, you're using the best available information from the state based on the budget that was passed 24 hours ago,
Correct.
right? D, you have the full baked expense in here for prior years, correct?
I'm sorry.
You have the full baked expense that's been approved by the RTM.
Yes.
As reflected in these numbers. I said that incorrectly,
Correct.
my apologies.
Gotcha.
Right. E, do you have the best available information in here for the grand list, based on all the
Yes.
settlements and everything else?
Well, not exactly, but it's only, there's been, the certificate of correction happened, but the total on that is equals $60,000.
So it's immaterial change?
Correct.
Right. So, and you've taken into account, thank you for the min and max. For the min and max, you're just basically saying, if everything were to go against us, we'd be in the whole $3 million. If everything was to go positive for us, we'd be up by about $1.4, $1.5 million. Is that a fair statement?
Right.
1.7.
1.2.
1.2, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the odds of everything going against us are probably limited. The odds of everything going for us are probably limited.
Yeah, well, the biggest min-max is the state revenue, which is now,
Which we now know.
right.
Things
I
could
was,
happen.
I was just
but we
trying to
don't.
figure out where Mr. Mayor is
Right.
putting the mill rate in relationship to min and max, but
Right.
now that 2 of those numbers have settled on a real number, it's,
Right.
it's less
Right, it's
relevant,
less
right?
risky, that's right.
Right, because
So-
when I start doing this, we don't have the information.
No, I
Information
totally get it.
flows in.
So the mill rate recommended, based on all that information, is 26.36, which represents a tax increase of 2.09%.
That is, where's my notes? Yes, that is
Our mill
correct.
rate increase of 2.09%. Does anybody have any questions? Other questions on this? Mr. DeWitt, are you good? All right, I'm going to make a motion that we approve the mill rate at 26.36 mils for an increase of 2.09% over prior year. Do I have a second to my motion? We'll go with Mr. Mottola. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We're done. Thank you for all the good work on this.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to go to item number 4. To hear and consider and adopt a bond resolution entitled, "A Resolution Appropriating an Additional $64,925 for costs associated with the design of the Duck Farm Road Bridge over the Mill River, and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation as recommended by the Board of Selectmen." Do I have a motion to put that before us? Mr. Brown, I'll take a second by Mr. DeWitt. The item is now before us. Welcome, Mr. Hurley.
Good evening, finance members. I'm Bill Hurley, engineering manager for the town of Fairfield. And currently, the town has $343,000 in the account for the design of the Duck Farm Road Bridge. Although the fee proposal agreed upon with the consultant was $328,000, the project authorization letter, the state-town agreement, covers 10% contingencies for extra work, review of shop drawings, which wouldn't even occur until during the construction phase, and an additional 10% work allowance to prevent the project from having to go back to seek for additional federal funding. So because of that, DPW and engineering is requesting the additional $64,925 to cover potential contingencies, extra work, and to reflect or match the dollar amounts for both the agreements, the agreement that we have with the consultant and the agreement that we would have with the state. The funding may or may not be expended, and any extra work proposed must be thoroughly reviewed and approved by both the town and the state prior to any commencement of additional work.
Mr. Hurley,
Sure.
in English, what happened here?
In English is the state apparently has come up with a, in order so that they don't have to go back to the Attorney General or the DOT Commissioner, they're adding extra contingencies into agreements, which makes their life easier. But unfortunately for the town, or for me, we have to now go through the town, process to match the agreements.
So there are these additional requirements that they are putting on us.
Yeah, in the strict sense of contingencies. That's
Okay,
correct.
so they want us to increase the amount we set aside and they're going to set aside an additional 10%, or how's this working?
Well, the request, $64,925 would match the agreements, and that would be a worst-case scenario. It would still get reimbursed at 80%.
80%?
Yeah.
So the 64 would get reimbursed at 80%?
Right, so if we never use it, and let's just say,
Yeah.
I mean, the last couple of bridge projects have been pretty close to, I think there was one that was like $4,000 more than the agreement. If that's the case, it would be close to zero, and the worst case, covering both agreements, would result in a town cost of $12,985.
Why are they doing this? What happened?
I don't know. I did pose that question, and the reply by the state and the liaison is, Bill, yes, it is a double contingency that the DOT has been doing as a means of adding extra funds to the agreement, so the need for a later supplemental agreement is less likely.
That's state government at its best, isn't it? It's no wonder we're having all sorts of,
Am I reading this correct? That the 80%, the feds pay that.
That's right, but the state is the administrator for this, yeah.
Yeah, because I would want the state of Connecticut administering as much funds as possible at this point.
The grants,
Yeah,
the grants usually do have, slight.
which means we're paying more money. All right. Anybody have any questions on this item? Seeing none, I'll call it for a vote. All in favor of this item? Opposed, abstentions? We're good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. All right, item number 5, to hear, consider, and adopt a bond resolution entitled, "A Resolution Appropriating $866,818 for the costs associated with the acquisition and installation of a townwide telephone system, and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation, as recommended by the Board of Selectmen." Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Nancy Burns, the IT Director for the Board of Education. This is David Kelly. He's the IT Director for the town.
Nice to see you guys again. Although every time we see you, you
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. Thought I was there.
although every time we see you, you cost us money.
Sir, can I have some more?
Quick question. Mr. Mayor, what was in the waterfall schedule for this project?
Oh, some god-awful number, $1.5 million or something like that.
Could you be more, was it $1.5 million?
Yeah.
It was $1.5 million. Okay, so this is roughly a little bit over half.
That is correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
now we can start. Thank you.
You're welcome. So this project has been a thought for any number of years. The current phone system is over 23 years old. the company that produced the handsets and the switches and such that make it run went bankrupt in 2009. So I think we've done pretty well getting almost 10 more years out of it. But we're really at the end of life. It's very difficult to get anything other than refurbished parts. There are no new parts available. And we're really getting to the point of being very concerned that we won't be able to keep that system running. In addition to that, there are economies of scale and savings with new technologies as well as functionality that we think that the town and the Board of Ed can benefit from. We went out to bid initially in early 2016, took a break to go do a needs assessment to make sure that our infrastructure in all the town departments, including the Board of Ed, couldn't support the project. The bid itself was very open-ended. We looked for on-premise, hosted, hybrid systems, really just opening it up to all sorts of opportunity. In the end, we received 17 proposals from 16 different firms, and we spent, I would call it, an inordinate amount of time going through details and honing it down. We got down to roughly half a dozen that we had come back through, do presentations, answer questions, and then we kind of discussed again what angle we wanted to go with. The Cisco product that we've settled on through Total Communications, which I'm not sure if they're still a subsidiary or part of Frontier. They were purchased by Frontier a couple years ago. Is a well-known system. It's in use in a number of different towns and boards of education across the state. Total has done many of these installations before with great accolade. The Cisco product itself is in the Magic Quadrant of Gartner, so it's well received. It's, I would call it leading edge, not bleeding edge, so it's a very solid product. We feel that there are a number of opportunities here for us to recoup costs. One of the largest reasons we went with this product as well is that it had a great survivability functionality. So in the case where we had a network failure, there were ways for the various town offices to be able to function, obviously at a reduced scale for telecommunications, but they could actually function.
Does this include police and fire?
Yes, it does.
It does, that's what I thought.
You'll see that the actual capital cost for the first year is a little over $615,000. The additional money that we're requesting deals with things like police and fire integrations and all those unknowns that will come out as we do the implementation project. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kelly for any questions you might have.
Questions, Mr. DeWitt?
Just one, is this a standalone system, or is this integrated with other systems in town, IT systems?
It's largely standalone. The telephone system has its own servers, which will be housed in 3 different locations in town for that survivability that Nancy referred to. If one building that has one of these servers that controls the telephone system goes down, the entire system can continue to run on the remaining 2. So we have N+1 redundancy, but those servers are separate from the town servers.
And we still don't have a town IT plan yet, right? A grand plan that we've been talking about, asking for since long before you were here?
Well, we're working on it. This project was actually underway before I arrived, so we need to finish this project.
I would add that although the system itself is standalone in the idea of the servers, it's still running off the same wide area network. So the local area network switches that you guys, for the Board of Ed, funded first phase of a number of months ago, this system will run off of that. So it's not all new.
Which is kind of my point. We've been asking for a IT plan for years and years and years. We hear nothing. And it feels like everything's kind of piecemeal. So I'm voting against this tonight. I'll probably be the only one, but for nothing else, to just kind of say that I want a real plan before we do anything else. So thank you.
Can we go to page 6 of the document? So we have, first of all, this is a 20-year bond, right? Of which it's $866,000 out of the gate, right? Or so. And then, Yeah, it's a 20-year bond, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the document might say, I don't remember when I looked at it, and I was going to change, I think it says up to 20 years or something. I think that we would bond this over a 10-year period.
10 years. Okay. I was going to ask that, number one. Number two, when I look at page 6, it says the estimated costs here, right? So it comes up to your 866,000 or whatever, right? Actually, I don't see that here. I see the 615 I think you referred to. What's the rest of the cost? Where am I missing? I'm just looking at this one page.
Okay, the next page which discusses the factors that will likely increase the cost off of the
there it
base
is.
quote from the vendor.
Yeah.
And so we worked with the vendor and with some of our town vendors to try to quantify what those police integrations and PA system in the school integrations might be. We also estimated that there might be an undercount in the number of telephones and data lines, that we might have to do a 5% wiring.
Right, so
and-
you've got
yeah.
contingencies in here
Right.
to allow for the unknown unknowns.
Well, we tried to approximate or
Right.
quantify those unknowns.
Okay, so, and it also, I guess, what I want to make sure I'm reading correctly, right, is you guys are saying, okay, here's a one-time cost for putting it in, bang. And then here's the cost for operating it moving forward, which you have listed is about $134,000 a year, right? But that's not incremental to our existing cost. That's actually lower than our existing cost if I'm reading the document correct. So
Right,
you're
yes.
in essence saying, we're going to save $49,000 a year, rough estimate, by putting in the new system. So we're going to spend 800 and some odd thousand, and then we're going to save $50,000 a year over the next however long we have the phone system. Is that a fair?
Yes.
Obviously, that's all estimates, but that's a fair assessment. We've gotten 23 years out of the existing phone system, and Mr. Mayor, you want to bond this over 10 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the anticipation.
All right. Is this a more secure phone system than we're currently running? Go ahead.
We believe it's more secure.
Is it more efficient than, will the public notice a difference when they call the town of Fairfield?
In a number of different ways. People will know who's calling. In those circumstances, like in a storm like Storm Sandy, there will be more capability of ramping up to be able to accept more calls.
More call, the town getting more calls. That's not
Yes,
Mr.
yes,
Tetro
for
being
like
on
a-
my phone more.
Like a not necessarily 911, but the 311 and the other kinds of things. There's more opportunity for voicemail to work properly. Voicemail is going to go to email, so that will improve, in theory, at least people's productivity, because they'll know what the voicemail messages are before they happen. Can you think of anything else?
Yeah, things like right now, our existing telephone system, we don't know when a voicemail message is waiting for us unless we pick up the phone,
Right.
wait for a stutter tone, and if you're on the phone and you hang up the phone, somebody might have left a message while you're on the phone and you don't realize it. So you respond to the resident or the parent more slowly because you didn't know you had something to respond to.
And right now, we've got a significant risk because the current phone system is no longer supportable. Yeah. I understand Mr. DeWitt's point on the IT plan. I also hope and know that you're working on it. I actually, Mr. DeWitt, I don't disagree with your comment whatsoever. I do, however, view the phone system as a completely separate project than the overall IT infrastructure and security and et cetera. And I also know this has been a critical path item that we've put to the side for a number of years because, quite frankly, we didn't think the work had gone into it, into justifying it. Not that we didn't realize, or that I didn't realize that you needed a new phone system, because you certainly do. Yeah. So, and this is a little bit more, to reiterate what I said before, a little bit more a half of what we have in the waterfall model, so it's well within what we set aside for it. Okay. Other questions, comments on this project right now? Anybody? Can we go to the bonding resolution and take a look at the bonding resolution then? I happen to agree with Mr. Mayer's comment on the bonding resolution. I would just like to make it official. We're going to do this.
So just on page 2, number 5, change the 20 to 10.
Yeah, and I would like to make a motion to amend the bonding resolution before us. Item number 5, where it reads, shall be in serial form maturing not more than 20 annual installments of principal. I would like to make that 10 annual installments of principal. Do I have a second to my motion? Take Mr. Mottola. Any questions, comments, concerns on my motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to change 20 to 10?
Ask you a question. Both spots in the city, there's 2 spots.
Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
it says 20
Both
years,
spots.
too, yeah.
Thank you.
It says 20, it should say.
Yeah, where it says
Both-
20, it should
change
say
all
10.
20s to 10.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Walsh, for cleaning me up. So I'm going to make, just to make it official, all in favor of that change? Opposed, abstentions? Okay, the bond resolution as amended is now before us to bond a total of $866,818 for costs associated with the acquisition and installation of the townwide telephone system and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation.
Can I ask one question dealing
Yes.
with this length? What is the estimated life for this system?
We expect the system as installed to all of the equipment to work for 7 years. Some of the parts of it are perpetual, like the software licenses and whatnot. We're paying annual maintenance to keep them up to date and up to spec, but they don't wear out. The telephone handsets will likely last longer than 7 years. A couple of the items, like those 3 servers we talked about, are 7 years might be about the time to replace those. That's about $30,000 of the.
So out of all the money that we're going to be bonding, what part is expected to have a shelf life of 7 years?
The servers themselves, those are basically just computer servers. They're dedicated to this function.
So $30,000.
The $30,000 piece of it is going to have to be replaced or looked at after 7 years.
So out of the whole amount of $800 and some odd $1,000 bond, only $30,000 total is going to have a shelf life of 7 years or less.
I would expect the handsets and the routers within the buildings to last a bit long, quite a bit longer.
Yes.
We have Cisco system in Bridgeport, it's mentioned in here, and we just replaced the phones this week, and the Cisco phone I must have had for 12, 13 years easily, and it was fine, so it's a good system.
The item is before us. Mrs. Leclerc.
Oh, I just wanted to confirm something. On page 6, it gives us a breakdown.
Yep.
And it gives us the, as you mentioned before, the capital portion, and then it gives us the annual operating expense. Should the annual operating piece also be bonded, or
No.
is that?
That
part
would
of
be in the
this?
operating expense.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's not included in the total. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Correct. No, thank you for that. Anybody else? Seeing none, the item is before us. All in favor of this item? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you very much, and good luck with your project.
Just a couple of quick comments, if I may, Mr. Chair. Yeah, as Mr. Kelly pointed out, we started this process before his arrival. I hired Mr. Berry, who has helped guide us through this process probably 2 years ago, and we got a really good deal there, actually. He guided. Nancy and Dave did a great job on this, and the whole town will appreciate your approval of this.
Thank you very much.
And with respect to Mr. DeWitt, we are working on that plan.
All right. Item number 6 is to hear, consider, and approve the appointment of auditors for fiscal year 2018. I'll turn it over to Mr. Mayor and Mrs. Leclerc of the Audit Committee on this item.
Yeah, you want to go? Basically, we've negotiated a reasonable price, have the engagement letter to renew the current auditors for another year.
What's the name of the firm again?
O'Connor, it's O'Connor Davies, PKF O'Connor Davies.
Yeah.
And what's the audit price now?
103? I don't have a copy of the document in front of me. I gave it to,
It's 99,870, I think, is that?
870.
99,870, and what did we pay this past year?
About that. It's about flat.
This is kind of like a who's on first.
I don't know.
Thanks for coming prepared, Mr. Mayor. I feel real warm and fuzzy as I sit here.
I agree.
We were just spent after that mill rate discussion. It's been all downhill since there. You know, we are approving clerks later, so I would step up your game a little bit.
Did that raise already go into effect? We put it last year.
Yeah. All right, let's try this again. What did we pay this year? What's in the budget for, that we just approved? And how does this compare to the budget?
It's what's in the budget we just approved.
It is the exact amount that's in the budget we just approved.
Yes.
And do we know what we paid this year? Do you recall?
It's very close to this. If we negotiated it might even be totally flat, but I can't swear to that.
Okay,
It
Mr.
didn't
Becker's
bring-
going to look it up, and
Oh, good. Somebody's got a budget book. Or maybe bad. Depends on whether I was right or not.
it's not looking good based on Mr.
Well, it's
Becker's
under-
face here.
Yeah, so fees, right, so fees and professional services. I've got 80, under Board of Finance, right? I'm seeing 88, 225.
Well, part of it gets allocated to the pension plan.
Okay. So,
Okay, so
where do we
let's-
want to go for that?
Do you have
then?
that broken out, Ms. Leclerc, do you have that?
It's
broken
flat
out?
year over year in the budget for that portion,
Yeah,
but,
that's what I thought.
okay. Under retiree benefits section then?
No,
Or would you-
no, because it would be in the, it's paid for by the pension plan, so it's not in the budget book.
I'll just put this away then.
Yeah, no, the town doesn't pay the
When do
pension
we have to
plan.
appoint them? All right, can I make a
Good job,
motion
Dave.
that we push this item to our meeting that is June 5th for a vote? That's not going to upset anything with the auditors. So I make a motion that we move this, table this item, taking no action, and take it up at our June 5th meeting. Do we have a second to that motion? Mr. DeWitt? Anybody have any questions, comments, concern? All in favor of doing this on June 5th? Thank you very much. Can we get just a further breakdown of what we're paying for what versus the town versus the pension, where it is in the budget, where it was versus prior year? And can we see, are we going to have the same audit team to the extent that they stay with the firm? It's going to be Mr. Senafani moving forward and his team?
That is correct.
All right. Not, and this isn't that we had any problem with them, we just want a little bit more specificity.
Understandable.
Okay, thank you. Item number 7, to hear, consider, and approve the Town of Fairfield policy on debt issuance. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Mayor. Can you step us through what's going on here, the reason for this, why we're putting it in place?
Yeah, as the body knows, we have a policy which is attached here as Appendix A on bonding and capital purchasing requirements. We've never really had a formal policy on debt issuance. It is an issue that comes up when we go out for bonding, and the rating agencies always ask, and my response the last several years has been, we do not have a formal policy, but we have an administrative policy, and the Board of Finance is committed to not fund, current operating expenses through debt, and to keep it within a 10% range. And so this just kind of guides through that. It would satisfy the rating agencies, and it'll make us able to tick off that box. It's a very basic policy, but I think it's comprehensive and adequate.
Yeah, there's nothing in here that isn't, it's just basically, when I read it, I just said it's codifying what we already do.
Correct.
Does anybody have any issues with any of the items laid out in this policy. And Mr. Mayor, does this policy then have to go to the RTM, or does this stop with us?
Stops with you guys.
And it gets, I'm sorry, Mr. DeWitt, I'll come to you. And it gets disclosed within our financial statements?
Correct.
And this, as you just said, is something that the credit rating agencies act upon it under each debt issuance. Hey, do you have a policy on this?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. DeWitt?
Yeah, no real issue, just one thing. When we have policies, and we've talked about other, quote-unquote guidelines or policies, we have that quote numbers in, and the second bullet point, strive to limit the total debt services, including debt exclusion and self-supporting debt, to 10%, which we talk about all the time. Are we all okay with the 10% going forward? And if we ever become not okay with that, I guess we'd have to change this policy, right?
We'd have to revisit it. Yeah.
Because it is a policy, right? So the guideline is kind of recommendation. We can be fluffy on it, but policy really kind of casts it in stone a little more, correct?
That is a correct statement, Mr. Wade.
Okay. I'm fine with that number. I just want to make sure we're all understand what
Mr.
that means.
Mottola?
And as, with respect to what Mr. DeWitt said, it is a policy, but what I liked about it is the way I'm reading this, these are guidelines, and if for some reason we need to, after careful consideration, emergency, we could, there's flexibility built
I mean,
into
there are
this
emergency
policy.
things in here which I thought all made sense. Again, it's just that one,
Sure.
again, and we all talk about, I think we all agree with the 10% number. I just wanted to be sure everyone understood, and that I understood that.
Perfect.
If we decide tomorrow that's 11%, we have to change the policy, even though it says strive to, right?
Anybody else? Mr. Walsh?
It seems to me the second bullet should say to no more than 10% at the end, towards the end of the first sentence.
To no more than 10%. Where are you, the second bullet? Strive
Second
to
bullet.
limit
At the very end.
to 10% of gross, to no more than 10%, I agree. Do, you want to make a motion to amend that?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about a couple other things, so maybe
Go.
we'll see whether we. We never issue debt. And to go into the third bullet, Bob, I'm more asking for your advice, and I guess the board here. We never issue debt on anything that's not in the capital plan. Like nothing comes up during the year, normal things that we don't know about, not emergency things. That I know there's a thing, fund emergency projects that come up that we fund for.
That is a correct statement.
Okay. Because we're going to be limiting ourselves. So I'm just telling you that if something comes up during the year and it's not an emergency or it's not in our capital plan, I'm going to tell you we can't do it.
Well, you're going to tell me,
Because
you're going
I'm
to.
trying to think of an example.
You're going to tell me not to bond for it.
Not to bond for it, to pay for it with
un-
cash.
Until it's included in the capital plan.
Until the next capital plan, you
Correct.
can get it in there.
Correct.
So wait a year.
Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on that, because I'm trying to think, I never knew that was really what we did.
It's what we strive to do. I don't know whether we've always achieved it. There have been, hell, when we first started the capital plan this year, I don't think the golf clubhouse was in it. Because it was inadvertently left out, as I recall, wasn't it?
It's in the waterfall.
That doesn't meet it.
Yeah.
Right away, we get something on tonight that doesn't meet it.
We knew that it was in there. In fairness, we called it out as soon as we saw it that it wasn't in
Right.
there, right? Right.
Yeah, it was in there the year before.
Yeah. Mrs. Leclerc.
I had a question. Has bond counsel reviewed the language of this policy?
No.
Should they?
It's a good question.
I had the financial advisor review it. Phoenix.
I don't think he plays a lawyer even on TV, right?
No. But, he's familiar with, that. I can certainly pass it by them. I'm sure it will pass muster.
Let's, when does this need to be signed off on?
Well, we'll be having our rating agency meetings in June.
Okay, so June 5th would not be too late for us
June
to put
5th.
this in place, right? So I'd like, do we have any other questions we want follow-ups on? Mr. Walsh, and my apologies, I skipped over to Mrs. Leclerc.
The question I have on the fourth bullet is whether we always adhere to that as well, because just tonight, when we were talking about the phone system, part of that phone system only has a useful life of 7 years. So does the entire thing have to be in there, or does it have to be the majority of it, or what does that have to be? Because I understand what they were saying, that a small portion of it's for 7 years, but
And a lot of it will be more than 7 years.
and a lot of it will be more. And I understand that
Right,
they said
so-
that, but
right.
when they said
By
not
the way,
to
they
exceed
don't
the
even-
useful life of the asset,
They're
part
not
of that
even
asset
quantifying
was less than 7 years.
Yeah, but they don't even
Yes.
know, but they don't even know whether it'll be 7 years or not, right? Because, let's put it this way, the current phone system they've had for 23 years, the estimated useful life is 7 years, but they don't know actually how long they're gonna keep it. The goal would be to keep it, the whole system for much longer than the 10 years.
The only thing,
I think what she said was that they're going to be replacing those parts.
No,
along
she
the
said
way.
those are the things that are basically, if something wears out, those are gonna be the things that wear
Mm-hmm.
out.
the only piece we anticipate certainly having to replace within less than 10 years of the servers, which is $30,000 of the,
So the question is do
Should
we
you
need to
change
loosen
this?
the language slightly to say that most of, so somehow to build in some flexibility there for us so that we're covered and not challenged, to say that, the.
And I think you should say, to Mr. Walsh's point, I think you might want to say will not exceed the estimated, or.
I mean, that's a good question for the bond council, too.
Yeah.
To
How
ask
about
that
language
question.
like strive to ensure that blah, 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 something like that, it gives us a little.
Yeah, you don't want to say the useful life, you want to say the estimated
I
useful life.
like that,
for the-
yes.
It's a fair point. I mean, in accounting parlance, this happens all the time, right? Because you don't really know how long something's gonna last. You say, the estimated useful life of a fire truck is 10 years. Something happens to that truck and it corrodes away in 7 years. You did your best.
Right.
When estimating it to say, we intended to have it. It happens all the time. Your point is very valid from a legal perspective. I'm just bringing the accounting view into it. You try to put it with that,
Yeah, I just, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
I'll ask more questions
Yeah, I knew you were gonna ask.
You have another shot.
So just procedurally, to establish either the cost of something or the useful life, do you factor in guarantees and warranties,
and I'll come right back.
which might
Gen-
apply to this?
Generally, guarantees and warranties would be for less than the useful life.
And where applicable, we may pay for a service plan. I mean, I'll call it a service plan loosely. Probably doesn't apply to
Yeah, no.
some items.
Go to Ms. Walsh.
Where does this policy apply if, for example, with the phone system, if the example was they came here tonight and said 40% of that system's going to last 7 years? How would you read this? How would you interpret this to the thing? I mean, this is
If
the question I
if 40% was going to last 7 years and 40% was going to last 13 years, then it'd be, and 20% somewhere in the middle or beyond, I would do 10 years.
Okay. That's a question I'd like you to address with the bond counsel. Like, these kind of questions that come up. I mean, I understand it's only 30,000 out of 800 and something, so that's a very de minimis piece. And you're right, they might go longer, whatever.
I look at the I'm sorry.
But if we have somebody coming in, some of these projects, it's the useful lives all over, and I thought our goal originally was, we'd be conservative on that number. And I think we are being conservative with the numbers, this project that we saw tonight.
I think you try to be reasonable.
Yeah, I just
No,
wanna.
your point is fair. I think where you get into issues is where you have a project like that, or let's take one of these school projects, right? We take a school, we build it, we amortize it over 20, 30 years, right?
20, nothing more than 20.
The roof goes in 10 years.
Yeah, that's
right?
exactly
What-
right.
What are you gonna do?
I understand.
Right, it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at the asset as a whole.
Right. So
Parts of the
it's-
asset are going to last
Since
shorter and
this is
part
somewhat of a
longer.
legal document, I think having it go by bond council, seeing what other towns do, I think it's a very valid point to just be clear on it.
You know, the majority of the project
Well,
will
you-
not exceed, or something, you know, something language like, I'm just trying to actually, I'm just trying to loosen it up a little bit.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Just the term useful life, I mean, the phones today work, they're useful, so, I mean, if they stopped working tomorrow, they wouldn't be, but they still have useful life, right? So that's a really broad term just in itself, right?
It's an estimate.
Exactly.
Other items, Mr. Walsh?
Those are the ones I saw.
Anybody else? Seeing none, I'm going to make a motion that we hold this item over to our June 5th meeting to allow it to be run by bond council and brought back before us. Do I have a second to my motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. Walsh. All in favor of holding this over? Opposed, abstentions, that is carried over. And Mr. Walsh did, or Mr. Mayor did have this policy ready a couple months ago, or just before budget season. We were in the midst of a lot of other things, so I held it over until now, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your working on that.
Good work on that, actually.
Item number 8 would be the Budget Committee report on the 2019 budget procedural findings and recommendations. This is just the report tonight. We're not going to vote on this item. We'll give it till our next meeting to vote on the item. But I did want to, we wanted to get this done in short order this year because it took too long last year. So I'd like to thank the Budget Subcommittee for making this happen, and I'll turn it over to Mr. DeWitt for a brief discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll vote on it in June. We're going to have a busy June meeting.
Right, procedurally, what we've strived for, and we actually did this year, was the next regular meeting after the vote, we would have our budget committee, you know, review and recommendations, so I'll take you right into it. Quickly, the observations of the members and a couple other people. We went to a 5-day cycle this year. It did appear to all the members that the budget hearings within that cycle weren't rushed. We were allowed to hear all the budgets. We had one, I'd call it, long night. I don't think we had any exceptionally long nights, but I think we did prove that that 5-day cycle was valid, right? And we could go with that. We also observed that having the budget vote on the regular meeting in April was appropriate. It didn't cause any angst. There was a lot of discussion about, oh my gosh, we got to do this. Well, the April meeting just coincidentally was very long because of other issues, Mill Hill, frankly. But if that were a normal April meeting, I think it would not have been an issue, right? One of the things, there's still, just in a continuous improvement kind of scenario, we still do get into a lot of details about programs, you know. I can't think of one right off the top of my head, frankly. But we should strive, and I've talked to the chairman a little bit about trying to keep specific discussions about programs that don't specifically relate to the budget to a minimum. So, for example, I'd be happy as the budget chairman to take a note and say, hey, we need to hear more in our June meeting about this program. Paving, right. So something like that. So that was an observation. We also...
The only problem with that, and I agree with you, but the only problem with not hearing some of the details about the programs is you hold it over to our June meeting. We've already voted on the budget. So for an item like paving, where we do go a little long sometimes, or some of the things, particularly areas where we're cutting back on spending that we've done in prior years.
Right.
You'd kind of like to understand the impact before you vote on the budget. Right?
So it's not so paving's actually not a great example, because I want to hear about, in painful detail, about how many miles and all stuff. I don't want to hear about chips and real paving and the meat of it, right?
And what happens with paving is it just went on too long.
Yeah.
So it just, it's okay, we're not saying don't ask any questions about paving.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Let's not ask questions about paving for 1 hour.
Or the same questions get asked several times in several
Correct.
different ways.
The paving,
Correct.
the one that went on forever, I know
There
there
was
was one
several.
meeting where we just talked about something.
Well, it was economic development, went around for a long time.
Economic development was a
Paving
right.
went around for a long time. And some of the things that happens is there's kind of a question that's asked one way, it gets answered, and then somebody comes at it with a different spin, but it's kind of the same answer. It's kind of hard to cut off.
But economic development is also the one I remember that was painfully long, and I sat here thinking after 10 minutes, wow, we could have done this in June and gotten the same effect, because it wasn't affecting his budget.
I mean, just that some of them don't necessarily have to come in June after, but they can also come before. I think some of the department heads, particularly when there's changes,
point.
know in January, or
That's a very fair point.
even us,
That is
maybe
a
we
very
can,
fair point.
we can have a
Though
discussion.
we
and
will
do
have
it.
to say, let's not put that on economic development, because that.
No, I don't want to call out any one person.
That was
Right,
us.
right. Oh, yeah.
That was
So,
all us.
Mr. Barnhart, don't take anything there, right? And the last observation is that, oh, go ahead, sorry, Mary.
Oh, I was gonna ask, could we add to like a quarterly review meeting, those type of discussions?
Yes.
Like policies on how many police cars, and I don't know what other type of equipment replacement programs.
Well, and part of that goes to the other side of it, which is we don't get the budget, and this isn't a criticism, this is a fact.
Yeah.
We don't get the budget far enough in advance to be able to give enough of a heads up that we want to explore certain things. So the department heads, like poor Mr. Barnhart came in that night, he didn't know what the heck to prepare for, right? Because we
Yeah.
hadn't had the opportunity to kind of talk about that. So he was getting, trial by fire as we were kind of unloading on him, because we didn't
Right.
have enough time, because we didn't know what was in his budget beforehand. So if we had gotten
Right.
the budget sooner, we could have said, hey, by the way, anticipate questions on this, because maybe we don't think you're being aggressive enough, or that we're investing enough in that area.
Right, and the specific line of questioning for Mr. Barnhart, as I remember, is he had some additional funding in publicity and things like that, which again, probably had some relevance to the budget discussion, but not maybe not an hour and a half's worth.
Right, exactly. Okay.
And then the last observation is that, we looked at the charter, and we believe as a committee that the budget hearing should be in accordance with the town charter. So the next page, you can all pull your charters out if you like. I've taken out section 12.2, which is the section of the charter, one part of the charter that is regarding the budget. I'm not going to read everything to you, but in Section A, 12.2.A, it says submission of budgets to the selectmen. It says that the first selectman has to submit his recommendations to the selectmen, which is the Board of Selectmen, and then they compile and submit it to the Board of Finance. I've highlighted the words. Then we get a recommendation under B, and the selectmen, again, shall submit the budgets with recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and the Selectmen shall make recommendations to the Board of Finance. We're not doing that today. So this is the charter paragraphs that we talked about in our meeting, just to make sure, just to see if we're in compliance. A couple quick facts. The current budget process, with the first selectman presenting a budget to the Board of Finance, started in the fiscal 98 budget hearings. I have all the data going back. Coincidentally, there were charter revisions that same year in 97, because we talk about the 98 budget in 97, and in 2006, and yet no one thought that it was worth updating the charter to change the process. So it makes me think that someone thinks the process is okay. There is a line here that says, if we all agree we can change the process. I've been on the board 10 years. We've never voted on a variance. I asked Linda Gardner tonight, I said, when was the last time it was voted on a variance? And she said, probably 1997. If we are going to have a variance, waiting 20 years is probably not something we want to do going in the future, if we ever decide a variance is what we want to do. So, last chart, our recommendations. The committee recommends that we keep the 5-day budget process. The 5-day budget process implies that there's a couple of snow days in there, which how we didn't have to use them is frankly amazing to me. But
Chris,
yeah.
Chris, would the committee consider, I think the actual specific 5-day process, I agree with you, that worked really well. I did really like the idea of having a couple of snow days pre-planned, and said we're going to have those.
Sure.
We're going to have those set aside.
Sure.
Just in case, and we can call them contingency dates, we can call them, and we can use them for snow days, or we could use them if there's a controversial issue that we want to hear more about on an independent day.
If my other members are okay with it, we could add a bullet that said we could add we had 3 contingency days
Yeah.
to the budget.
Would that be okay with everybody?
You good with that, Mr. Brown, Ms. Marmion? Yep, okay, good, we'll add that to the budget, okay. Along with the chairman, you like that, right?
Absolutely.
Help the board limit budget hearings to discussions based on the budget, again, back to the whole, let's not
Yeah.
talk too much about programs, but we should, again, in the theory of striving for, continuous improvement. And then our final is conduct the budget process in accordance with the town charter. Frankly, I don't think this really needs a vote or anything. I mean, it's just the charter. The charter is very specific about when the RTM has to vote, and then everything backs up to that. We have to vote a month before, and Board of Selectmen has to vote a month before that. So it's pretty well laid out.
Yes, let's
Sure.
go with Mrs. Leclerc. I saw her hand, and then we'll go to Mr. Matola.
So the only thing I'm not quite in agreement with is scheduling it for the April Board of Finance meeting. I think we got lucky this year with how the dates fell, but to me, it seems like it would be better if it was like they were separate meetings, because we didn't make a lot of changes this year, but if we did have to go line by line and discuss every line of the budget, I think that could be overwhelming.
I would be, I understand your point. I think what it comes down to is, to what you said, kind of the timing of when it fell, based on the calendar. So I think we need to look at it as relates to that.
Right, so the reason I felt comfortable, or we feel comfortable with that, the charter says that the RTM shall hold the annual budget vote on the first Monday in May. Well, we always have our meeting the first Tuesday. So in theory,
Is that truly, does that meet the requirement of when it's got to be delivered to them? A month
see,
in
we have to give them
advance?
30 days, so I guess in theory, we're,
Yeah, you can't do it, you're the only once out of every 7 years would you vote on it in time to give it to them to have 30 days.
Right, it's got to be March.
Yeah, it's gotta be March.
This year, we were okay, but
It was,
next year.
it was on this, because of the first day of April
think-
was a Tuesday.
Yeah, right.
oh, I guess if it falls April 1st, May 1st, then, yeah, right, I understand
Yeah,
what
we
you're
don't have
saying.
the 30-day window all the
Okay.
time. I think that's absolutely right.
Okay, well, by virtue of the fact that we comply with the charter, I mean, we can just back it off. So for next year's budget, well, I think we kind of do that with Jennifer anyway. Just, we start in May and work backwards, right?
Yeah, we got to do that when we do the calendar.
Yep.
But I do think we won't be able to hit the requirement except every few years.
Yeah.
If we do it the April
Well,
meeting.
next year, the budget, the RTM will vote on the Monday, which is the 6th, May
And what's-
6th. And then we will,
Our first Tuesday would be what?
our first Tuesday would be April 2nd.
So we'd be
Well,
okay.
So we're good there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Thank
we
God it's
should
not
get the
April
budget.
Fool's Day.
See, look at that.
We should get the budget on March 6th.
But if you just keep with the third bullet.
First Tuesday,
doesn't matter.
the first Monday has to be the
That, that's correct.
What?
Take out the first bullet.
So they have to vote on May 1st.
So if we amend the first bullet to say, keep the 5-day budget process and take the rest of that out?
If they vote on a Monday.
That I have to vote on the first Monday.
And add, and keep it the
First
Monday is the
Monday is
6th.
always the first.
Yep.
It's always before the first.
May.
The first Monday is always before the first Tuesday unless
Yeah, but the
Tuesday is the
first
first.
Monday, Jim's right, the first Monday in May is May 6th.
And the first Tuesday is the 7th.
Is this, right. So it
We
wouldn't
have to give them
qualify.
what, the charter says 30 days.
3, 4, I'm sorry, I stole that from you.
And April's a 30-day month, so you need you don't have that advantage of a 31-day month.
No, it says a month. It doesn't actually say 30 days, it says a month, which is kind of strange. Well, I get,
Works, Bob.
yeah. The recommendation of the selectmen shall be submitted to the Board of Finance no later than 2 months before the annual budget meeting. So, It's not, again, it's not 30
Works,
days or
it's April
29
2nd
days,
to
it's,
May
it's
6th.
months, so.
Sorry?
It's April 2nd to May 6th.
Right. So if we take the first
But if
bullet,
Tuesday is May 2nd, well, that's right, then Monday has to be May 1st.
It's back to who's on first moment.
Right,
No,
so.
Monday's not May 1st.
guys,
then how can Tuesday
I'm
be- how
going
can
to fix
first
this.
Tuesday be May 2nd?
If we change the first,
Wednesday is the first.
I'm totally confused.
May 6th is the first Monday.
Just follow the charter.
We're
You don't
fine.
have to worry about
that's
the
correct.
dates.
So,
When is it, Tuesday, Thursday, it doesn't matter.
so we'll just say, keep the 5-day budget process.
Just follow the
And we'll
charter.
add 3 contingency days, and we follow the budget, charter.
Correct.
That's the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any follow-up items that they'd like on this, or can we talk about this in a month? Go ahead, Mr.
Just a couple of things I just wanted to point out. I think if part of the policy is going to be including the charter, I think you need to include that section C, because that's important, the variation of the procedure. I don't know if the policy, we're going to like reference the charter, so.
Well, let me be clear, because we had a policy discussion tonight. This is not a policy. Anything we do as a budget
Recommendation.
committee is
What
just a
is this?
recommendation or a guideline or,
We're going
right.
to have to, okay.
Right.
All right. I mean, the,
Go ahead.
so just so I understand the timing, the Board of Selectmen then would have to give us their budget by
Well, Tuesday, sorry.
around
March
February.
6th.
RTM has to
March
get the
1st,
budget
right around
by
there,
the
give or
first
take.
Monday. The RTM has to get by the first Monday in May. We have to give it to them 1 month before, and the selectmen, by the charter, has to give us the budget 2 months before the RTM meeting. That's exactly what the charter says.
Right, so as Jim's saying, if the RTM meeting is May 6th, which is the first Monday, right, then they have to give it to us by March 6th.
Right. Okay, the only thing I would say is,
It works.
yeah, I guess there's a couple concerns I have, and we can talk about this. You could have a situation, maybe I'm incorrect about this, that the Board of Selectmen would have to vote on its budget before the Board of Education budget is completed. That's one
How does that work?
concern.
Because they get their
I don't
budget, their
remember.
budget's done in January.
Yeah, their
Their
budget's
budget's done
done in January.
and it's actually done by like the
I thought
20th.
Yeah,
done
they're,
in
no, they're, see, this is where, this is a confusing thing. Their budget is done in January. They don't have to officially submit their budget to the state until, when is it, Bob? The first week
February,
in
well, by statute, they're supposed to be done by February 1st.
February 1st.
That's incorporated though in the entire, all right, that's
So then the
fine.
Board of Selectmen would have that for, the
A
first selectman
month,
would have it.
yeah.
And then he's got to
All
get
right.
the board, they've got 5 weeks.
My only concern, and this is, I guess, the Board of Selectmen, is it would have to request a variation of the procedure. And we've been doing it this way for 20 years, right? And I guess what you're saying, Chris, is you've never seen any official vote on any variation, right? I kind of looked too and didn't see anything.
Yeah, I guess my personal position is this: we should follow the charter. If we really haven't voted on this in 22 years or 21 years, and I can only vouch for my 10, right? Then we should vote on it this year. So we're either going to say follow the charter, or here's a variation.
Or here's a and I'm fine with that. I think we just got to keep an open mind with the Board of
I
Selectmen.
mean, the charter clearly
They-
gives an option to have a variation if, and I quote, with the
all.
approval of the Board of Selectmen, with the approval of the Board of Finance.
So that's the thing. I'm interested in being as efficient as possible, and I'm not sure that the Board of Ed having their own budgetary meetings, having
You mean
department
Board of
heads
Selectmen?
Board of Selectmen having their own meetings with department heads presenting their budget, and then that whole process is repeated with us again, is the most efficient way to do it. But I just think we need to keep an open mind. I think all of us agree that we want to be as efficient and as possible, and have the best information, the Board of Selectmen as well as the Board of Finance when voting on the budget. That's all. That's my two cents.
And keep in mind that we by no means want to stop the Board of Selectmen or any selectmen from coming to our meetings. I mean, they are ex officio. They can come anytime and sit right over there. So if they want to come to the meetings, they're more than welcome, but
Did we ever, like, So who was the first selectman in '98? Was it Ken?
Oh,
or
I-
was it Audley then?
Yeah, oddly, and Paul Hiller was the chairman of the Board of Finance.
All right. Other than that, I think the 5 days is terrific. The rest of it I agree with, but that's the one concern I would have.
Great. All right, anybody else?
Yeah, I just obviously got confused by the calendar. It seems like there will be some years where maybe it doesn't work, but most of the years I think it would work.
I think the way we
Yeah,
just
but it
say it
works.
is, we follow the charter.
Right,
And
we
I think-
follow the chart, and most years I'm saying that would work.
Right.
I mean, the charter always
Sure.
works, right?
Well, no, because the charter is confusing, because there will be a couple of years out of seven.
No, what gets
where it wasn't.
confusing isn't the charter or that. What gets confusing is whether we could do it at the April meeting or not, or to Mrs.
Right.
LeClaire's point, is it advisable to do it at the April meeting, given there might be other things on the agenda like there were this year?
Right.
Right?
Which is a valid
Typically,
point.
and by the way, typically that doesn't happen to us.
Right.
No,
April
right.
meeting is typically a pretty light meeting because everyone's so caught up in the budget process.
Right.
That we don't have a lot. It just so happens this year, Mill Hill and Sherman got delayed, or they would have been before us prior to the budget hearing.
Right.
Prior to the budget hearings.
Right.
And then it was actually, once they did get approved, I pushed them back to April because I didn't want them in the midst of the budget hearings.
Right.
Right? So that's what happened.
And just to be clear, at least the way I interpret it, there's only really, as far as the budget's concerned, the charter only calls out one date, one hard date, and that's the day the RTM has to get the budget.
Correct.
Everything else is a month back from that
Right.
or 2 months back from that.
Right, and the only thing I'm saying is there will be a year when the first, having it the first date in April won't allow it to meet
Totally get
that
it.
requirement. That's all I'm saying.
That's
And I-
gone.
And I don't know how many
That's
was it one
completely
out of
gone.
7 or 2 out of 7? I have no idea.
What?
The-
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
This, the only, and as we mentioned earlier, personally, I don't care when we do it, as long as we have a chance to make sure that we have a decent document available. The budget, this board meets at the end of September, makes all the closing entries. So we don't actually close our books until 1st of October, more or less. And then the department heads will not have full 3-year information before a certain date. And I'd just like an opportunity, well, I'll put the schedule together to show how, where I say where the Board of Finance meets, where the period where the board, where the selectman
Why
has
don't
his
you-
meetings, where the Board of Selectmen have their meetings, and I'll send that to Chris and.
Correct.
And we can talk about it.
Excellent.
That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that's great, and thank you to the committee for all your hard work on that. And it really was a good budget process this year. And if we didn't have that one night where we had to move DPW, that night wouldn't have even been all that long either. So it worked really well. And I think part of that is we have such experience on the board now that there's a lot of things we already know and we don't have to waste a lot of time with. And that's one of the things that played to our benefit as well. And I want to thank all my colleagues on the board for making it, I would say pleasurable experience or less painful experience than a budget process could be by the way we put it together. So more to come on that, but we know the direction we want to go. Last item tonight, to appoint the clerk and assistant clerk to the Board of Finance for the next year ending May 2019. So during the budget process, we did adjust the salaries for these positions, the stipends for both Bob as well as Jen Carpenter. I do want to thank them for all their hard work and effort. Bob puts a lot of work into this. He comes here, he presents before us, he brings his team when he needs them, and we greatly appreciate that. And Mrs. Gardner left early tonight. We want to thank her for her efforts. I also do want to once again recognize Jen Carpenter. She's just a pleasure to work with and is so diligent in managing me and tracking me down and keeping me on task, and I greatly need that, so I thank her very much. And she's just been doing yeoman's work for us. So thanks to Jen and Bob. So with that, I would like to make the motion to reappoint Bob Mayer and Jen Carpenter to their positions as clerk and assistant clerk of the board for the next year. Do I have a second to my motion? We'll take Mrs. Asma. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? You guys got it. You're on the hook again. So thank you. Next item, number 11, is any other communication. I don't know of any. I haven't received any. Do we have any?
None from my office, no, sir.
Okay. Deb, thank you again, as usual, for being here. And I'll entertain a motion. We'll take Mrs. Marmion, we'll take a second from Mr. Becker. All in favor of adjournment? Those opposed? Good night, everybody. Thank you.